This is Tim from EarCandyCabs.com. This is a video response to a question that we got from somebody a little bit ago about what the difference in some things are. So if you're watching this to hear what this stuff sounds like, you can just stop watching now because I'm not going to play through anything. I'm just going to explain a couple of things. If you want to check out a really cool video of a guy playing, check out a guy's channel on YouTube called JZ Guitar, G-U-I-T-A-R, John Zoccos. He just posted a video the other day where he's showing some pickups in a Stratocaster, some Paul Gilbert stuff, and the guy's just all over the place. He's amazing on the guitar, and everything about the guitar he can fix. He fixes guitars and does guitar tech for a lot of famous guys, and he's a really cool guy. You should check out his channel. That's JZ Guitar on YouTube. But anyway, so this is a video response to a question we got about the individual was asking us, what's the difference between like a bass amp and a guitar amp? How come bass amps are 500, 600, 700 watts and guitar amps are 100 watts, 200 watts? There's a lot of aspects to answering that question. So I'm just going to kind of go off the top of my head and go through some things here. This is a tube amp. It runs off of vacuum tubes, just like the old school televisions used to run off of before we have all this flat screen HDMI stuff going on. This is just an old-fashioned vacuum tube, and you can see when you turn the amp on, the filament in them, just like a light bulb, glows, and that's where you get the tone from. Not counting your fingertips. If you don't have it in your fingertips, then it doesn't matter how great of a tube amp or solid state amp you have, you're just not going to sound that good. So the basic principles of a tube amp breakdown is you've got the preamp stage and the output tube stage. The preamp meaning pre-amplification. These tubes are called 12AX7s. There's different tubes, just like car tires. They all basically do a very similar function within the amplifier. But the preamp tubes will shape the tone according to how much gain you dial in or out, and how much treble, bass, and middle you dial in or out of what's called the tone stack, or the tone knobs, or just the knobs on your guitar amp. And the power tubes, a lot of amp companies make them switchable, where you can switch the wattage from 50 watts to 25 watts. So, like I said, there's a lot of information I could try to put into this video, but I'm going to try to make it as general as possible. I would definitely highly recommend going to your public library and checking out a couple books. The First 50 Years of Fender is a great book. It kind of covers tube amplification, how it got started, who started it and why. The first guy to play the electric guitar on television. It's a great book. Then there's just a book called The History of the Guitar that'll answer a lot of these kind of questions. Here you've got a classic, Fender Stratocaster. It's solid body. These are single coil pickups. That's, you see just about everybody in the industry playing a Stratocaster at one point in time or another. This is a hollow body, or semi-hollow body, so the body actually has chambers cut out. It's chambered in between the pickups. These are humbucker pickups, to where it's like basically two single coils put together, but that's the difference between a semi-hollow and a solid body, and a humbucker and a single coil pickup. You can have single coils in a hollow body, you can have humbuckers in a solid body. All this stuff is not set in stone. It's interchangeable to what the individual player actually finds that he likes the most. And that's actually the same with tubes. Some guys like 6L6s, some guys like EL34s, EL84s. There's so many different variations of tubes. Like I said, it's like car tires. They all basically serve the same purpose, and that's getting you from point A to point B, which is from the amp to the speakers and then out to your audience or to your ears. This is a reverb tank. So what that consists of is just got some springs that run through here, the RCA inputs, and that's what makes your amp sound like it's in a big music hall or a big stadium or something like that. A lot of amps don't have reverb, and a lot of amps do have reverb. Bass amps typically do not have reverb, so that's a reverb tank right there. Some tube amps have 2 channels, some have 3 channels. Some of those channels even have variations to that channel. This is a single-ended tube amp, meaning that it's just one channel. So if you want to play cleans through it, you have to dial in cleans. If you want to play heavy, you have to dial in the gain to play heavy. There's no foot switch to it. This is a two-channel tube amp. So you've got this is a Crate Vintage Club 50. So you've got your main channel, which is just your cleans, your volume, your treble, your bass. Then you've got a channel select switch. So also it's operatable by a foot switch. So you just hit the foot switch and it switches from one channel to the other. So you've got your basic clean channel, and then you've got your channel for your overdrive or distortion. And it's also a tube amp. You can see the preamp tubes right there, and the power tubes are back here. This is the clean channel power tube section, and I actually have the power tubes for the overdrive channel removed because I'm doing a repair on this amplifier right now, and I'm waiting on tubes for it. So you can see this is called a PC board. These are caps, and definitely don't ever stick your hand in one of these things if it's plugged in, even if it's turned off. I just don't recommend it if you're just now kind of starting to get into this stuff. It can be pretty fascinating, and you can forget that it's plugged in and go to touch something and really kind of shock yourself, and that's no fun. So that's the guts of not every tube amp. Not every tube amp has a PC board in it like this, but they're all relative. So that's a tube amplifier. Then you have what's called a solid state amplifier, which means that there's no tubes in the amplifier actually at all. And you can see that right there. There's no tubes, there's no reverb. It has reverb, but it's digitally recreated. There's no tank in it to actually have springs that react to the sound that the amplifier is creating to make the reverb. It's digital, and this is actually called a modeling amp. It's a Line 6 Duo Verb. It has literally multiple channels and capabilities. I actually hang on to this amp. This is, in my opinion, one of the best modeling amps ever made. It's better than the Veta stuff. I really kind of dig this amp actually. You've got Fender Blackface, Tweed 410, Gibson Explorers, Soldano SLO 100s, JCM 800, Plexi Lead. Plexi is the really famous tone Eddie Van Halen is known for from the early Van Halen days. The Line 6's version of a nice clean tone. Modern Class A amplification, which kind of gets into THD, which is total harmonic distortion, which I can explain, but that's a completely different video. Plexi 45, Marshall made Plexis. High Watt 100, which Pete Townsend and the Who kind of made those real popular. Then a Fender Blackface, small Tweed. Then Zen Master, which I believe is a Zinke amp. I'm not exactly positive where that term comes from. But you've got 4 channel selectors right there, and this actually has a foot switch that runs, and you can access, I think it's up to like 50 different presets. So it's not necessarily a 50 channel amplifier, but it's digital, so it has different tone setting capabilities that you can dial in and store to memory and then recall through your foot pedal, which is kind of cool. Solid state amps are great because they don't have the tubes, and you can kind of bang them around. They're not as fragile as tube amps. Tube amps are pretty fragile pieces of gear. Tubes can go bad from a number of things, banging the amp around. Tubes go bad over the period of time of tube life in the amplifier, and again, that's kind of like a whole other video with tube maintenance and tube amp biasing and cap replacement and all that stuff. We can get into that a little bit later. But these are cooling fins. A lot of the modeling amps these days are what's called stereo amplification. That's a mono amp, meaning that it's a monotone going in and it's a mono signal coming out. You can have a stereo amplifier where you have a monotone going in, and then inside the amplifier it splits it into 2, and you have a right output and a left output, which technically, to run in stereo, you need 2 speaker cabinets, a left and a right, so then you're in stereo. The other cool thing about the newer modeling amps is they have the XLR outputs that you can just direct out to a DI box or direct out right to the mixing board. XLR stands for X is the ground, L is left, and R is right. So again, they're addressing the stereo aspect of the capability of the amplifier. This is a 300 watt guitar amplifier, but 300 solid state watts is like 75 tube watts. Tube amplifiers are very spongy, they're very punchy, they're very powerful compared to some solid state amps. This particular Line 6 duo-verb amplifier will get insanely loud and will blow 70, 100 watt speakers pretty easily if you're not real careful with it, especially if you're running it in mono. Another thing with amplification and speakers that's really important to pay attention to is ohms. A lot of Fender stuff runs on 8 ohms. It's pretty common, 8 and 4 ohms. Some of the Gibson and Epiphone stuff runs at 16 ohms. That's another video in itself also that we've actually kind of gone over in previous videos. You can go back and check on ohms and stuff like that in some of our previous videos. And then you have bass amplification, which a lot of it is tubed, and again a lot of it is solid state. This is a solid state carbon Pro Bass 2. Bass amplifiers will have a tendency to have what's called a graphic equalizer on them and a crossover in them, so the bass player can choose what frequencies he's sending to what cabinets. A lot of times bass players will have more than one cabinet. They'll use the crossover in the amplifier. Just look up crossover. Just Google the word crossover and you'll get an explanation of that. And so they'll use the crossover in the amplifier to send the really low sounds like 40 hertz and 40 to 150 or so hertz down to like what's called a subwoofer, and the higher frequencies into a 210 or something like that. And it splits and makes it splits the high frequencies from the low frequencies and makes for a more definitive sound if that's what the bass player is looking for. So that, in short, is basically the difference in some amplification. If you could just stay focused on this right here, I'm going to run over and grab this piece real quick. This is a completely different amplifier that is not made for guitar or bass. It's actually a tiny public address amplifier. You've got 4 microphone inputs, so you could actually do a little tiny gig with this thing. Plug in a vocal mic, plug in your acoustic guitar or a drum machine, or like 2 overhead drum mics, and you could mic your guitar with a microphone and have it come out through the PA speakers, which is how things are done in bigger venues and bigger clubs. But that's another kind of amplification system all in itself. And then you have different kinds of speaker cabinets, different size speakers, but ohms is all relative. It doesn't matter if it's a 6-inch 500 watt speaker or a 12-inch 15 watt speaker. 8 ohms is 8 ohms. So yeah, you've got public address amplification, tube guitar amplification, solid state guitar amplification, tube bass amplification, and solid state bass amplification, and they can be mixed matched. I will play the guitar through the bass amp sometimes. It sounds really warm, it sounds really buttery, the EQ is very flexible, and so yeah, that in short hopefully answers your question. Another thing real quick, if you're getting into guitar gear, get yourself a multimeter and just real quick learn what the terminology around the dial stands for. You cannot go wrong. It'll keep you from blowing up your stuff. Thank you for watching. Hit subscribe. If you got any questions, send them our way and we'll answer them for you. Have a great day.